Guilds of London by TMG. This is a new game set in the 17th century. You're trying to gain control of guilds. So guess what? London. To gain power, money, notoriety. You're also sending people to plantations on the other side of the ocean, apparently. It's a Euro game, definitely it's fairly abstract. The theme is there on the cover, in the name, etc., in some of the elements, but the game is still fairly abstract, which is not a negative per se. It just means that the game is about the mechanics and the interactions of the mechanics much more than the story that the mechanics and the components create. And you have an interesting combo mechanics here, some of which you do not always see together. You have worker placement, you have area majority, you have a lot of variable or special abilities and powers that you can activate, but you also have a deck of cards that generates random resources for you. So there's more randomness here than you have in many other Euros. You have modular board with tiles that are placed to create the board. A lot of different elements, almost like a combination of mechanics, almost like an anthology of modern game mechanics. But do they go together well, or do they result in a pleasant game experience? Let's see how Guilds of London plays, how it works, and then we'll try to answer that question. Here you see how the board looks at the beginning of the game, or at least how it may look. This is one of the possible configurations of the board. The board is modular. You place a guild hall space at the beginning of the game on the table, then you surround it with these tiles as per instructions from the rulebook, and later in the game you expand the board by adding tiles all around. The tiles come from this stack here. You will use many of them, but not all of them, so that is good. So you do not know exactly in each game which tiles will make it and which tiles will stay out. Some tiles represent normal guilds, such as this one. Some of the tiles are special guilds, as you can see from the blank back. There's another special guild. Guilds usually have a single color, but some also have two, and the back should show that. For example, this one is both green and blue. And you can see the same symbols on the other side of the tiles, indicating the color of that tile, the color of that guild. Some, again, have multiple colors, some, a lot of them, those are the special ones, many a single one. Each player has a color, each player controls workers, meeples. A friend of mine that I played this game with calls them monsters. I don't know, you have to ask him. There's also this piece here, which is a neutral non-playing piece. It will simply affect scoring and when areas are scored. Looking at the tiles a little more closely, I already talked about the symbol that indicates the color, and you see a number here. This is the number of meeples that need to be there, that number or higher, for that tile to score. If this is the situation, this tile will score, or at least we should say will be resolved at the end of this turn. Basically, each player takes a turn, then you go through the board, starting from here, and in order you check every tile to see if they score, which ones they score, and then you resolve the ones that score. You have to do it in order because there may be game effects that make it such that resolving a tile will affect tiles that will be scored later in the same round. So this is the basic idea. Everybody takes a turn, check for scoring, move on to the next turn. You continue like this until the end of the game. Now, what do you do, however, during your turn? I'm glad you asked. Well, first you play cards. This is a card-driven game, which is not all that usual for Euro gamey games such as this one. These are the cards. As you can see, there is a big deck of them, and you'll cycle through them very quickly. You get new ones and you spend them. Because pretty much everything that you do is regulated by these cards. Cards have colors that you see on the edge, but also you see indicated by the symbol. Each color also corresponds to a symbol, so this is good for the colorblind. I always appreciate that. Well, not colorblind myself. I appreciate when designers think of that when they make their games. So each card is a color and a symbol, all or multiple ones. Then we have here a cost that is required to activate the effect in the card. Now, the cards also represent coins. As you can see, each card represents a coin as indicated by the back of the cards. So if I want to play this card for its effect here, I need to discard another card together with it to pay the cost. Some of the cards also have different types of costs, but that is the most common one. Some cards do not have a cost and you can use them for the effect without having to worry about the cost. Now, the effects are represented by symbols, visual logic, and some are fairly intuitive. Some other ones will take a while to figure out what they are. Clearly, they wanted to cut costs, and that's understandable. So there is no verbal component, there is no verbal element on the cards, but that means that you have to learn what some of these very complicated visual messages mean. Luckily enough, there is this player aid. You had 2 copies of this player aid detailing the effects of the cards. As you can see, there are a lot. And you can learn some of the basic grammar. For example, the symbol here means every time. The white meeple means your own meeples, things like that, but it is still a lot of those symbols. The first game, just take it as a learning game. Players will spend a lot of time looking at these player aids. So during your turn, you will have your hand of cards. You will play cards from your hand, resolve effects, and be done whenever you decide to be done, or whenever you do not have cards anymore and you do not have actions to perform. You can play a card for its color, in which case it allows you to move one of your people from the guild hall or from somewhere else on the board to a space that have that color, that symbol. If I play a yellow card and say I am the red player, I can move one of my meeples to any one red space, yellow space, of course. As simple as that. I can also choose to play a card, as I said, for the effect. In many cases, I discard a card or multiple ones to pay for the effect, and then I resolve the effect. Many of them, for example, this one, I don't have to pay anything. If I play for the card, I can hire 2 people, so I get 2 people into the guild hall. This is where your people go when you haven't employed them yet. Or I can get a neutral one. I can get a neutral one that goes in my personal supply. These, and you won't see that very well on the black table, so I'll put him here for now. These black tokens go in your personal reserve, and they are very powerful, very useful. These are these neutral tokens. So this is what you can do, and I think you can do with your card is simply to burn the card, figuratively. You discard it without activating any of the effects, doing anything but taking a meeple from your personal supply and put it in the guild hall. These are the 3 main things, 4 things you can do with the cards. Move meeple to a color location, activate a game effect, use a card to pay for another effect, use a card to get a guy into the guild hall. Ta-da! This is how it works. Now, there's also a special tile which is placed out on the board, which is the plantation tile. This tile is scored only every couple of turns. It has 2 sides. At the beginning of the game, the players can choose which side they want to have up, and the side that is up indicates the reward for the player that has the absolute majority and the second player. The player that has majority and second player with majority when the tile is scored. So we check all of these tiles every turn. This one we only check every couple of turns. And here we have this other board here where it has the player, the turn track. And as you can see, the gray, the underline, the gray spaces every 3 turns, or when you check the plantation tile, also other things happen. We're talking about scoring, about activating things. So at the end of a turn, when everybody took their turn, you check the scores. And in each area that has a number of pieces equal to or higher than the number indicated there, you check to see who has majority. And this guy counts as 1, doesn't belong to anybody, but it counts as 1 for activating purposes. In this case, for example, clearly yellow would have the majority. If a player has a majority, the player gets the reward for the first player, which is here on top. Here, yellow would get 4 victory points, and would get to draw 3 cards from this deck, the mayoral deck. Look at them and choose one. Everybody starts with a card. These are long-term advantages. You get cards, you get one at the beginning, you get them through game effects, you keep them face down, and at the end of the game, you reveal them and you score them. So these sort of like secret long-term agendas. For example, I have this card, will give me 2 victory points for each yellow area that I control at the end of the game. This one for every green, every red, every purple. This one gives me a victory point for each card that I have at the end of the game. All sort of things. This one gives me victory points for each different type of guild that I control. This one for each second place marker that I have, because first player will get the first advantage and the second player will get the second advantage. And as you may have noticed, the advantage for the second player is assigned randomly. Every time that you add a new tile, you draw a second player rewards token and you place it there at the end. So you get the reward. In this case, I will get a neutral guy, but you also keep the marker in case you are the player that gets that mayoral advantage at the end, so you need to score the markers that you have. So you get the advantage and you get to keep the marker as a record. If you have majority, everybody but one piece of the player that has the majority is returned to the guild hall. This card is flipped face down and you put one of your guys there. Now the guy counts as a master of that guild, which is this robe guy here in this game effect. This symbol means game effect applies to meeples that you have that are controlling a guild. Now the guild is locked, is yours. But a couple of twists when it comes to scoring. Yes and yes. When you have majority, the player with the majority wins the competition. However, here's the trick. If there is a tie, the tie is won by the player that has control of most guild spaces orthogonally to the space that you are scoring. In this case, everybody seems to be in a tie, but the red player has an adjacent, orthogonally adjacent control guild. Then that counts as a +1 as a tiebreaker, and in this case red would get the majority, red would get first place. However, there is another wrinkle, another angle, which is, remember these guys here, when you're scoring players before the scoring is actually officialized, players that have these guys have a chance to replace pieces in the competition with these guys. So for example, suppose that this is the case, and now we're gonna score, and red and yellow are tied, but I am a yellow player and I have this guy here. So now I'm gonna swap, before we know we're scoring, but before that is complete, I'm gonna swap one of my neutral guys with that guy. This guy goes in the guild hall, and ta-da! Look at the majority now. No doubt anymore. As yellow player, I do have majority. So having some of these neutral guys is extremely powerful because it allows you to swing things around the last second. I would almost say, most importantly, it is powerful and important as a deterrent, because when you do have a lot of those, and players try not to mess with you because they know that it may be a waste of resources to do so when you can regain majority easily after a while. Or maybe they're doing something to make you consume your pool of neutral tokens before they attack some area that really is important to them. So as we said, you continue like this, turn after turn. Every third turn, you also add a layer of new tiles. You had 4 new tiles around the board, so increasing the guild, giving you opportunities for players to control guilds as the old ones fall under people's control. Every third turn also you relocate this guy that goes to the tile with the lowest number. In this case, for example, I think is that one that is 11. And guild tiles have their number here in the bottom right corner. Every third turn, also, as I said, you score the plantation, which is outside of the board, and you assign the corresponding rewards to the players that have important presence there. Something important about turn order. As you score points and you keep track of the number of victory points that you score on this board here, as you score points, the turn order changes. So at the end of each turn, you determine the player's order for the following turn. The player that is ahead goes first, player who is second goes second, and so on and so forth. That's a very simple but very effective negative loop that prevents players from gaining too much advantage, because going ahead is neat, being ahead in points, but going first is pretty tragic, because whatever you do, players that come in last have a big advantage because they see what's happening, they can take advantage of things that you've done and steal majority and get to score in areas that you wanted to score. So right there is a simple, neat idea that I like very much. So you continue like this until the game is over. At the end, you score the cards. That's those long-term mayoral cards that you have acquired during the game. You score those. You add the scoring to your score up to the point. You also score points for each pair of orthogonally placed guilds that you control. For example, let's say that this is the case. Then at the end of the game here, score 2 points for this pair and 2 points for this, 1 point for this pair and 1 point for this pair, for a total of 2. Having a square is neat because it scores you 1, 2, 3, 4 extra points at the end. You total the points from all the sources, orthogonally adjacent guilds, mayoral cards, your previous victory points, and that way you determine who the winner is, who is going to be the leader of the guilds of London in the game. I like it. I like this game. I enjoyed it very much. It really is a smart hybrid, and so much so that it doesn't feel like one. I mean, it really is smooth in the end. Yes, you have that card element that I think probably will drive some of the hardcore Eurogamers out there nuts, because your best calculations may simply not pay off. You're working towards a certain objective may not happen. In truth, you have a lot of ways in which you can manipulate your hand, manipulate the set of effects that you get. Some cards may be very expensive, but after all, if you really need that effect, then you can spend a lot of resources to activate a certain effect, or maybe you're lucky and you get something similar without having to spend the big resources. After all, if you want to go to a location that is green and you have a green card, that's great for you. If you don't have it, maybe you have a combination of other cards that will allow you to still do the same thing, but it's more expensive, but it's more laborious, but it consumes more resources. So it really is not necessarily always a matter of like, can I do this or can I not do it? It's a matter of like, how do I get to where I want to be? And am I willing to pay the cost that it would take me to create a certain effect, to trigger a certain effect? So randomness is there, but it's not like I roll big resources and you don't have any resources. Too bad for you. It's different combination of resources that you have to work around. You will always have something to do. You will always have chances of doing some things. It is just that you need to figure out how to optimize that. It's very interactive because everything is relative. There is a hard limit, which is you need to reach a certain threshold for a tile to be triggered, but once that happens, everything is based on the relative presence of the players, on the effects that they can activate, on the neutral tokens that they have. So it really is about reading the opponents. It really is about reading what the opponents are trying to do. including try to figure out what their mayoral cards are. Because if you start seeing that the players seem to be obsessed with a certain type of tile that they try to take control of, well, maybe you do have that mayoral card that makes you score at the end if you take control of green locations. I don't know, maybe you're just getting all the green guilds because you like the color, but chances are that there is something there. So there's this element of reading what the opponent's trying to do and trying, of course, to get in the way, to try to steal points while still scoring points and pursuing your own objectives, even though maybe you will have to create a list of your objectives for yourself that manages to achieve both things, advances your cause and prevents the opponents from advancing too much in the game. I enjoy it. I enjoyed the variable turn order. To me, that is one of the key elements in the game. Yes, I am ahead. That's great, but that means the next turn I'm gonna have very limited possible opportunities. So maybe I'll take a breather instead of doing things. I will not play any cards. If you do not play cards at the end, you get to draw more cards. So I'm setting myself up for my big comeback. As most likely as this turn I'm ahead, I go first. People will pass me, but now I'm behind and I have a big hand of cards thanks to the fact that I did not play cards before. I used my entire turn to draw cards. So there's the back and forth of people pushing for position and switching first, second. It keeps the race pretty tight. With the occasional runaway leader, yes, but not too much of a problem. Something that is fun, though, is that uncertainty is given by the mayoral card, because you may have somebody who stays behind all game, keeps a low profile, so they always go last, they're always doing their stuff, they're capturing a lot of mayoral cards. At the end of the game, they have been in third position maybe the entire game, but you do not know if the mayoral card will allow them to then score a lot at the end as those secret agendas are revealed. It's entirely possible to win the game without ever having been the first player a single time. There is an advantage even in that. There's an advantage in going last and being behind a couple of points. And yes, there are times where maybe you can choose between scoring 4 points and 3 points, and you decide to go for 3 because that prevents you from bumping into the opponent before you, and so that gives you an advantage next turn. I like it. I like all of these angles. You see, there are many moving parts that go together and that are fun. When we're talking about these general mechanics, which was what I've been talking about so far. One thing that makes the game a little difficult to play, especially at the beginning, is the large number of effects, is the fact that the symbols are not always easy to read. So the first game or two that you play will be slow, it will be hard to see the flow, the pace, it will be hard to see the strategy, simply because there are just so many effects that you have to become familiar with. Even after like 2 games, some people I was playing it with, that was the first 2 times that they played the game. At the end of the second game, they were still struggling, and they still reported that it was a problem for them, that they didn't enjoy it as much as they hoped they would, given the potential that the architecture had, precisely because of the constant need to refer to those charts, to those player rates, to figure out the effects, individual effects. After a while, I didn't mind it. After a while, I didn't have much of a problem. Again, some players will find the curve, that it takes them longer to walk through the learning curve, and so they may take longer to get to the point where you can enjoy the game. Maybe some people will give up before. So there's an entry point which requires some commitment. Even more so than other games, so a lot of those similar icons to learn, such as, I don't know, Race for the Galaxy is a famous one where you do have to learn a lot of those icons. There are more here than there are there, so it takes a while. But to me it's worth it. I mean, I'm happy that I took the time to learn all the icons, because then when the game started flowing, I really liked the interactions that it created. I really liked the strong sense of mutual influence, again, because everything happens in a context where things have relative meaning. So there's so much of this mind reading. I really like that. We live in an age of renaissance of board gaming. Board gaming is a hobby that is bigger, more profitable, more well known and respected than it ever was. And one element, of course, clearly is that we are rediscovering the direct direct interaction with people, talking to people across the table rather than texting them and sending them emails. And there's a game that definitely does that. It's a game that is about the presence of the people in the game. It's about what everybody's going to do next, what they're trying to achieve, the way in which they may respond to you, what you think they know about what you are trying to do. There is this very strong sense of interaction. It has more than a few moments of take that, so there is that element too, in case you don't like it all that much. Definitely when somebody comes in and switches a token at the end and steals a plan that you had, they score an area that activates an effect that gives them another way of messing with you later during the same scoring thing. It can be pretty confrontational, as sometimes you have in Euros. This is a Euro that has a Euro type game that has screw that slash backstabbing slash take that moments that can be pretty intense. Again, because I cannot score unless I steal scoring from you. That is the key, the golden idea behind the design. But it's a smart design. It's a fun design. If you're willing to put in some time and energy to learn all of the symbols and game effects, a design that has a lot to offer. Huge replay value thanks to the different cards, the different tiles, the different second player rewards that are placed there. You have the board that changes throughout the game. That is also fun because you have to adjust to to the expanding map of London. A lot of different elements that go together, and once you are familiar with the rules and effects, they do go together well. They coalesce and they create a very smooth experience, and one that frankly I had a lot of fun playing.